Hi everyone, my name is Emily Anastasi from the MvVO art team. I'm happy to virtually welcome you all to today's Ad Art Show 2020 Lunchtime POV from MvVO Art. It is my pleasure to introduce today's show, Why Ad Art Show, which is hosted by Bennett D. Bennett, principal of Aerialist and co-founder of 600 and Rising. Today's guests are Maria van Vlodrop, founder and CEO of MvVO Art, Roger Bentley, Chief Creative of MvVO Art, and Isaac Aden, Chief Curator at MvVO Art. Welcome everyone, let's get started.
Hey, good afternoon to everybody in attendance. I am very humbled and honored to be in the room with, in this virtual room at least, with these three esteemed members of the founding team for the Ad Art Show, the third annual Ad Art Show. So I'd love to at least go around this virtual room and have everybody introduce themselves, who they are, their background, and what brought them together for this really innovative experience this year in the Oculus. So we can start with you, Maria.
Oh, thank you, Bennett. Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. And we're so honored to have you chair this wonderful program. So thank you. Thank you. The honor is ours. So my name is Maria van Vlodrop. I'm the CEO and founder of MvVO Art. MvVO Art creates opportunities for artists, and Ad Art Show is such an opportunity. My background is advertising. So I was an assistant account executive on Diet Pepsi at BBDO. That's how I started my career in New York. And I've worked in many agencies. And I realized that, I liked account management, but I liked business development a lot more, because on the business development area, working with the creatives, we had a lot more leverage to do bigger and better campaigns. Once you get the business, then so there was more freedom. So I'm really a business development person. That is who I consider myself. And I grew up in a house full of art. My parents are collectors. We always had art on our walls, and we almost had no wall space left. And I didn't realize my parents were collectors. I never really thought about it. And then I started going to art fairs like everyone, and to galleries. And I always thought, it's strange. I have so many amazing creative friends in advertising, and I love their work. How come they're not out here? So I started looking into that. And basically, as I was researching, looking, I, of course, thought to myself, of course, Andy Warhol, Edward Hopper, Mark Rothko, René Magritte, you name it. So many amazing, amazing talent came from advertising. So I thought, let's create the first art show showing the next generation of artists from advertising. And here we are in our third year. So that's my introduction. Thank you.
All right. You're next, Roger.
Yeah, well, we had no art on our walls where I grew up, except for what I made. Usually it was with markers, and usually it was just straight on the walls. So I was always looking for art as a youngster, and found it really on the TV. I was in love with advertising from the moment I first watched it. I think the first ads I ever saw were from Mapo with Mickey Mantle. So I fell in love with the Yankees. And being from Oregon, I was in no proximity to New York, but I knew I had to go there one day because I discovered that's where all the ads were being made. By the time I got out of college, I was here in Oregon and able to get a job at Wieden & Kennedy eventually. And that really put me on the path for being pursuing excellence in creative. And that's sort of been the thing until I met Maria when we were working together in Helsinki on Finlandia vodka. And we had a great experience together working on that brand. It was wonderful to be in a place like Helsinki where it was completely different from the United States, but at the same time, they were creating things just like we were in New York. Then eventually when Maria came up with this idea and talked with me about it, I felt like it was the perfect thing to be a part of. So I jumped right on board, and it's been a wonderful ride from the very beginning.
Great, great. Now for you, Isaac.
Bennett, for a great introduction. My name is Isaac Aden. I'm the chief curator of the Ad Art Show, and I'm also an artist. And I think that my background as an artist has really shaped how I became a curator. It probably started when I was a kid, when I lived outside of New York. There weren't really any places to show your artwork. And I was curating shows, and I didn't even know that there was a word for it. And essentially it would just be inviting a bunch of people I knew together, and I was part of an arts organization, and they would could almost do it more like a music festival. Someone would get a venue, someone would get a liquor sponsor, someone would do marketing, and there were big kind of parties, events. And so I learned my relation to doing exhibitions outside of just making art was that if you wanted something done, you had to do it yourself. So it was very grassroots, very DIY. And that's how I began my career as an artist. So I would make art and I'd want to show it. So they went to me hand in hand. And as that evolved, I just started getting a better skill set of how to put together good exhibitions. And people started asking me to do it. And my last gallery had almost suggested, maybe you shouldn't do this anymore because it interferes with your career. And then people kept asking me to do things I just couldn't say no to. And that's actually how I met Maria. Someone from Gagosian asked me to, recommended me to work with her. And, you know, I show a lot internationally regularly. I have a show right now, 30 pieces in Rome. I've got a solo show in New York City right now. I've had like well over 100 group shows, and I've curated in a lot of places. I mean, the Bronx Museum, White Box, grants from the New York Foundation for the Arts, the State Department, all types of things. And this is a really unique project, and I'm really excited to work on it. So thanks for the introduction, Ben.
Oh, not a problem, not a problem. So this is the third annual Ad Art Show. I remember back in my time at the Drum, going to the first one at Sotheby's in Manhattan on the East Side. And if I'm not mistaken, this is not just the first time in a place and space such as the Oculus, right? But this is your second time doing some sort of digital experience with these artists who happen to work in advertising. So I'd love to hear, especially for those who are new to understanding the Ad Art Show, just this 3-year journey for the three of you.
Would you like me to start?
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. So basically, when I had the idea of Ad Art Show, I discussed it with Roger, obviously, and then I started discussing with various friends. That's what you do. And I took a page, literally a page, and I put the picture of Marilyn Monroe, and I walked around, met people, and said, "Hey, did you know that Andy Warhol did this?" And he was from advertising. And then I added more pictures of more artists. So I initially just met people casually, and whoever I met thought this was a really great idea. So eventually, through a friend of mine, I met Laura Scholler, who's the board of director of the new museum. And I shared this idea with her, and I said, "What do you think?" And she was like, "This is fabulous. Why don't we talk about it?" So she introduced us to Eric Scheiner, who at the time was the head of contemporary art at Sotheby's. And he was also the ex-director of the Andy Warhol Museum. What a perfect introduction. So I'm grateful for that. And, I sat down with him again with just a piece of paper, explained the concept, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is really interesting." So we were very fortunate. We had good friends. And, then of course we needed a sponsor. So my sister-in-law introduced me to her friend at NBC Universal. And we presented, again, over a cup of coffee, very, very informally. And again, it was seen as a very good idea. So we were surrounded with positivity. And I think the miracle happened because I went to meet with David Sable at Y&R, who used to be my boss years ago, and I shared then the idea with him. And he thought, this is a great idea. Why don't we launch you at YNR? So we had a launch. We had our first exhibition at Sotheby's, and we had 100 artists, and it was absolutely amazing. And really, what happened is that some Sotheby's went under construction, and so we had to really come up very quickly with an idea. And I'm going to let Isaac continue and explain how we were walking in the streets of New York and wondering what are we going to do next. So Isaac, please go ahead.
Sure. One of the things I really think about a lot is the physical space. And so once we had done the show at Sotheby's, everybody was very pleased with it. Everybody wanted to, repeat the show the next year. And they wanted a construction, and it just physically wasn't possible. So we had to rethink the idea. Maria, we had a partnership with Artsy, which is an online art platform where they sell art. And that's where we kind of populate the art so people can go and discover it and purchase it. And it's a very large platform, very successful. So they have online shows that they can do. And Maria had said, what if we do an online show? I said, well, we could do that, but it needs to be rooted in some place. And I think I was just walking on and I said, like these Link NYC things, which if you're not familiar, they're like giant phones on the streets of New York City, and they kind of have replaced phone booths. And they have a mix of PSAs, advertising, and just different neighborhood information. And so what's great about working with Maria is she's very good with strategic partnerships. And all of a sudden we were having a meeting with Link NYC, and then this was happening. And so then the curation had to consider different neighborhoods, different streets, different locations, different times of days, in proximity to audiences, all different types of audiences. And what was nice was we could really reach out and not just center in one place, but then the challenge was we usually do some kind of big opening gala, and everything was dispersed. And that's when our partners at the New York City Economic Development Corporation, they were doing the design fair. That was also in May, the same time. And one of their partners was this design feature of New York, the Oculus, which, if you're not familiar, is just an architectural masterpiece by Calatravi. And they have these giant digital screens. And they saw the synergy, they made the introduction. And so very quickly then we had to put together this digital exhibition, but scale it for the Oculus. And then the great thing was the WPP group that is the parent organization, I believe is the way you would say it, of YNR. They're located in Tower 4. So the proximity is like, you just go up into the tower. So we had the gala there, and that kind of became the epicenter of the project last year. And so the great thing was we had done this digital art show last year, and we were supposed to do it again this year before the pandemic ever even started.
Anything to add, Roger?
Yeah, from the very beginning, when I heard what Maria was saying about Ad Art Show, you put those words together, it's an interesting, I guess you could use the word dichotomy. They don't necessarily fit together in the industry like they should. And there has always traditionally been a barrier between the art world and the advertising world per se. And yet the examples that Maria gave are so glaringly obvious, like Andy Warhol and others. Once you start looking into it, you discover even people like Michelangelo had a day job sometimes.
Yeah.
And he didn't do those paintings out of passion. Oftentimes it was, and obviously the Sistine Ceiling was a passion project, but he was paid to do someone's portrait of a, famous merchant's wife or something. Same with Da Vinci. It goes on and on and on. If you dig deep enough, you find even someone like Georgia O'Keeffe did a project for Dole Pineapple in Hawaii, where she was brought in to do development of a campaign. And it just is so glaringly obvious. Folks like myself who have only ever really done the ads and fancy myself as being a bit of an illustrator, and I can certainly whip together a thing that could go on a wall somewhere. I don't consider myself able to achieve certain things like a painter does, but I have the appreciation as an art director background, and most advertising people do. Well, we had to bridge that somehow and say, wait a minute, there's somewhere out there is the next Andy Warhol, somewhere out there is the next Georgia O'Keeffe, or any number of people who have worked in that way. Even if you consider something like Toulouse-Lautrec and his posters that he did for the nightclubs in Paris, they are art, but they're posters. A.M. Cassandra is an example. Those things he did for the railroads of Europe or the shipping lines are now collected as beautiful pieces of art. It was obvious that there was a market there, and we wanted to tap into that. So we brought those names to the forefront when we started talking about it. We said, think of Warhol and Hopper and names like that, and it just worked very well. The other part of advertising, in terms of not just where the art was going to come from, but what we were going to do to develop the advertising for the show. Again, it had to be something where we could make an inroads into a category that is otherwise somewhat austere. If you think of the gallery world or the museum world, certainly a place like the Whitney has a look and feel that is very high end and very beautiful. We needed to compete with that. So the development of the identity for Ad Art Show was something that came from some very basic elements. The logo is a square. It uses primary colors of red, yellow, and blue. The typeface is Futura, as simple as you can get. Based on that, we really are almost at a point allowing the advertising and the identity of the show to not be a big, giant thing that looks like a bird flying through a whatever. It is just typography, and then it gets out of the way to allow for the art, because the art is the hero here. Yeah. And certainly the way that Isaac has laid out the shows, even especially if you go into the Oculus and you walk to some of the screens, it is truly monumental, not just to be in a space like the Oculus, which is absolutely a piece of art in itself. Calatrava is an amazing architect, but and it feels like a cathedral when you walk in. Mm-hmm. And to be able to see art in that place feels so appropriate, and that's something that really works for the show. It just, things seem to flow, and that gap between advertising and art has just feels like it's gone away for us anyway, that art show.
Great. Yeah. As a writer, I can appreciate knowing that even the greats like F. Scott Fitzgerald and a few others started their careers as copywriters. So, I feel like I'm, in a nice small bucket of really great people who are able to understand that marriage of commerce and creativity. Let's talk about the art. This is the Ad Art Show after all, and there's a lot for viewers who are walking through the Oculus or anybody who's looking online to see. And, as from what I've known over the years, this experience has brought out quite a diverse array of individuals. And y'all have ratcheted it up just a little bit this year with Don't Silence Our Voices Week. So I'd love for you to, just, tell people what to expect from this year's Ad Art Show.
Well, this year's Ad Art Show, I think that, first of all, I want to say that it's been a very unusual year for us because, we were planning to do the show in May. We're all set up to go and we couldn't. So we had to reschedule everything and move it to September. So first of all, I'm very grateful to the artists and to our team and everyone and our sponsors, because, you know, I picked up the phone, started calling everyone and saying, would it be okay to reschedule? And, you know, big companies like NBC Universal, it's not easy to reschedule a sponsorship. Well, they did it. Westfield, they did it. The artists, they did it. So in the first place, I feel like our team this year really pulled themselves together to deliver a show in the pandemic. So the other very important aspect of this year is that we were going through a very awkward time in, you know, the pandemic, social justice. So we felt, you know what? We've been so fortunate that the show is on. We need to really leverage the platform to do good. And so we talked about it. What can we do? So we decided to partner with City Harvest. They're a wonderful charity organization. And please go to our website, order the t-shirt, because we're going to, you know, contribute. It's Hunger Action Month. So I'm very proud of that. And the other part is, you know, when we had all this, when George Floyd incident happened, we have amazing diversity in our group of artists. And, you know, I didn't just want to go out there and just, you know, put the BLM logo. I thought, let's call our artists. We have a lot of Black artists. So I picked up the phone and I just called and I said, what can we do? Is there something we can do? We have a platform we can leverage, we can help. And this idea of don't silence our voices came from one of our artists, Fearless Negro, who her name is, that's her artist name. That is what she calls herself. And that is what she wants us to call her. And together we came up with this initiative. So you will see that. I'm not going to talk too much about it now. You will see it the last week in September. So what I want to say is this year, I'm really proud that the platform is doing more than just showing art. It's also being grateful and doing good. So that's what I would say. And then I would let Isaac speak about the art and the artists.
Thanks, Maria. So to talk about the art and the artists and what you might expect, if you haven't seen the show before, let me give you an idea of what it is. If you're not familiar with the Oculus and the World Trade Center, it's located at the original site of the World Trade Center, and it's a transportation hub done by the architect Curator. And like Roger said, it has a cathedral-esque kind of quality, but almost out of the future. I think it's one of the most contemporary buildings, probably the most contemporary building right now in New York City. It's all white. It almost looks like some kind of sci-fi creature. And it's quite a sprawling complex because it links all of the World Trade Centers together. And so they're large LED screens. Some of them are about 8 by 10 feet. And then one of them is 4 stories tall. And one of them is actually at the base of the original World Trade Center. So if you were to pass through it, you'd be standing in the original World Trade Center. And it's actually almost the length of both of the 2 towers as they originally were. So it's incredibly large scale, some of the screens. And so what we've done is we had an overwhelming number of applications, and we try to be as inclusive as possible. So we have a large number of artists in what we consider the group show. And so these artists are then featured in almost kind of like a salon style, and we try to focus them in mostly in this one area. And so if you were to go, you would see that. And then beginning week, this runs the entire month of September. So that's running the first week, and it continues through week 3. And then it alternates on a loop with what we call features. And then so we've shown the artist's work in a much larger scale. And then we have the Don't Silence Our Voices exhibition as part of that. And so in terms of the art, it's kind of hard to summarize it because they are artists from advertising, and the level of the applications. A lot of people that I saw last year, that's much stronger, I would say. The diversity in terms of background, where people come from. You could see in the finalists, I would say almost half are international. It's incredibly diverse. And then in terms of the mediums, we have people doing everything from painting to kind of craft-based textiles, photography, sculpture, and all different kinds of style, everything from purely abstract to figurative and representational. So it's a very diverse exhibition in terms of what the subject matter is. And what I find interesting as a curator, and that's kind of unique to this moment in time, is that a lot of art galleries or museums were trying to do virtual projects and just kind of synthesize something out in space. And what's wonderful is this exists as a digital show, but in space. So you can go and you can see it. It's a very large space, so I feel like airflow is probably pretty good. It's not claustrophobic by any means. But then you can also watch it through our website. There's wonderful documentation, there's videos, etc. So we've tried to marry the idea of a virtual experience for people, international or different cities throughout the United States, and the ability to go see it in person.
That's great. That's great. So, I mean, we've got somebody who represents the art space in Isaac. We've got somebody who represents the advertising space in Roger. And for me, in understanding this concept and getting to know each of you in our recent panel call, I just find this intersection between these two, from the outside looking in, very disparate parts of our lives as humans, just like so distinct that you would never see the overlap. And I know both of you touched on it a bit, but I would love to at least get a grasp of what both of you have, both you and Roger and for Isaac, what you've learned in terms of just like, how this has made you to better it, at your different jobs, and also ways of thinking about the world.
Well, I think one of the most interesting aspects is the fact that the medium that we exist in now is an advertising medium. Hmm. The art is shown on screens that would otherwise be advertising Pepsi or Frito-Lay.
The irony.
It's an interesting sense of, in the world today, especially in a place like Westfield at the World Trade Center. It's a mall. The design of it is so unbelievably beautiful. Feel as though it's almost like it's a church to commerce. And that in itself is a very interesting thing. Part of this year's show, and to comment on the diversity of our show, just a little bit. I knew going to advertising this year's show, it would be some hurdles, and the incidents with George Floyd had already happened. We had some discussions with some of our artists that needed to happen, some really good and difficult discussions. And we, as an organization, we stepped up and said, okay, what do we do? And I think in developing the concept for advertising this year's show, we managed to talk about today's events, the world events, and be as broad as to say, everything they had before happened. We are now right here, and it's going to come in the future. And in many ways, we're leaving it as an open question. In fact, the first video, if you look at our site, says, what is the past? It's one of our artists who's walking through the landscape of New York City. David Strange is his name, fantastic artist. And he puts a mask on, very appropriate nowadays. And he starts asking questions of what is the past, what is the present, and what is the future. And the last line he says in there is, now is for art. And then we set up a sort of aerial view of Manhattan that comes down onto the Oculus, and then we go into the Oculus, and then the show starts. It is very much a moment right now. You know, this whole summer has been, this whole year has been a moment. And what happens in the future from this point on is, it has to include everybody. And hopefully our show is going to that message.
The thing that I probably learned the most from this collaboration between art and advertising is the advantage that usually doesn't exist in most art world circumstances of essentially advertising as an extension of marketing. And usually most, museums would have a marketing department or something like that, but the strategies are different. And so when you really bring someone to the table, that's really what they're doing, is they're specialists in marketing. And then what that also has opened up the door is bigger reach, more inclusivity. And so the specific things that I'm talking about is, say, for example, when we did the Link NYC show, I don't think just as an independent curator that would have been possible. It really was, it definitely helped coming from the angle of marketing, the strategic partnerships. And what that did was that it was able to open up the potential audience much broader than it would just go into one location like Sotheby's, right? So now you have a bigger reach, you have a more diverse reach. And then at the Oculus, like Roger just said, the space is essentially advertising space. And so we're subverting that and showing art on it. And it's great that then we're returning that to artists from the advertising industry. And those digital screens are positioned strategically to have the largest impact. I mean, I don't remember what the number, I want to say it was like 300,000 people a day would normally see it, something like that. So over the duration of a month, I mean, it's just staggering the number of people that see it. So it's really that. And then the other aspect in terms of working with it is, I think there's probably a lot of designers that are there doing their day job and just thinking that they're not really having an impact. But there are cultural institutions that would not survive if it wasn't for a marketing department trying to let people know that there are these things happening, to try to do outreach, to do sales, to support arts and culture. And even in maybe a corporate, situation where they're not a cultural institution, a lot of those corporate institutions are then sponsors and do philanthropic work. So say, for example, like NBC, I mean, they do produce culture, but they're helping to sponsor this. So I think, even if maybe you're an employee at a bank and you're doing, design work or something like that, and you think, oh, this is just that, there are ways that then that influences culture. So working with advertising partnership synergies like this has really opened my ability to see the broader range of what's possible.
Yeah, that's really great. I'd love these answers from the three of you, and I hope that anybody who's watching and based in New York and social distancing and all of that, but still commuting, has a chance to check out the Oculus and all of these amazing works that my peers in the advertising community have put out there. I have two final questions for the group. One, and Isaac kind of helped with the segue, is, and probably you too, Maria, is this wealth of partners and sponsors who have helped bring this to life, right? You've got NBC Universal, you've got Westfield, you've even gotten the One Club and the Clios to come together, usually in the ad world, there's this sense of competition, and this is probably one of the more neutral spaces. Just let the art shine and let the talent get to shine. I guess one, I'd love for you to just speak on the feat that it is to bring all these different players into the room, but also, I'm sure there's a challenge in making agencies and their talent feel like their work is worth showing at such a exhibition space as the Ad Art Show.
Yes, so I would say that what we're doing, we're breaking barriers. Okay, so that is very important as a concept. When I had the vision, for Ad Art Show, one of the things that I really thought was very important was to bring the art and advertising world together, because it's still very separate, but I think we're bringing it together. And I'm very grateful to the Clio, because Nicole Purcell from the Clio, when I met her and she heard about the concept, she was like, this is fantastic, and she's very much into art. So she collects, and she got it immediately. And she was like, we want to give the winning artist a Clio award. And this is such an honor. Can you imagine? So, so we're breaking barriers. And of course, one of the very important thing for me was, that's why Isaac and Roger's combination is so important. I could not launch this show without really having an art creative person and an advertising creative person working together. And I tell you, it's like two chefs in a kitchen. You don't want to be around them when they're creating, okay? You just kind of get out of the way. But they come up, Roger comes up with the messaging that's very relevant without overpowering the art. And then Isaac comes up with the art, and somehow, and they have very different sensitivities, but they make it work. Magic comes out of that combination. So for me, and I don't think I know any art curators and creative directors working together today anywhere. So this is a very breakthrough concept. And that's why you see what you're seeing. It's a combination of art and advertising. So that is very important. The other aspect of it, this is all about celebrating creativity. And it's the creativity of the talent of the artist in advertising. So there is no competition. Everyone is going to celebrate it. So it is true that we don't follow the advertising model. When it comes to Ad Art Show, it's driven by the art world. The art world decides who's going to win. Because we want the advertising industry to feel proud that they have been accepted by the art world. It's very important for us. So I would say that is, to me, the important point of this show. That's why we're breaking barriers, and no, there's no competition. We have Group M and we have Zenith Media on the same board. It's okay. And everybody's coming together to celebrate creativity. So yes, no competition.
That's great. That's great. Anybody else have anything to add?
Well, yeah, when it comes to the advertising agency world, obviously they're under a lot of stress because of the changes that are occurring. And yet, advertising has not slowed down on TV or radio or internet. There's still as many ads that pop up. They're being created. And to this world, it's a funny little change going on. I think traditionally, the agencies have felt like if they have great talent who can create wonderful pieces of fine art in their agencies, they're okay with it until they think they might lose that talent to go off and do their own thing. But lately, it feels as though they're starting to embrace that. And when they see the success of Ad Art Show, I think, like any normal business model, they'll understand their relevance in it as well. And hopefully agencies will wake up to the fact that it means more to have an Andy Warhol on their staff than it would if they kept them locked away in the mailroom or in the studio somewhere. To support them and let them blossom and become something greater means that they themselves become something greater because they support art in that way. And a lot of agencies in their heart want to support art anyway.
Yeah.
They're great collectors of art. You'll see it in their lobbies and in their executives' offices. So there's a natural progression for them to become members of the kind of program that we've got going here.
That's great. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for, having the time to chat with me and with this audience through YouTube, and everybody who's planning on viewing this series of interviews over the month. I do have one last question for the three of you, and it's kind of around legacy. Yes, the Ad Art Show is 3 years old, but I always looked at it as fairly groundbreaking, not just for the ad world, but for how the fine art space delivers exhibitions and art going forward, especially with the way that you have all put this Oculus show together, the Link NYC together. I would love to know what your thoughts are on just like what this means for not just the ad world and what it can do for advertising people, but for the the art space, which Art Basel, I think that was just recently canceled for the year. You've got Freeze was shifted, these really big tentpole exhibitions and even museums throughout the world are trying to readjust. So the whole digital factor here just becomes so much more of a thing that all these more traditional curators and exhibitioners need to be keeping an eye on. So I would love your thoughts, and also final words for anybody who's going to be viewing this month.
I'll try to jump in. I mean, it's hard to say because the times are extremely uncertain. But I think you mentioned very well, I think the news came out today that Art Basel was canceled for this year, and Freeze, I believe they're just all digital show. So like I said before, we are already in a position where we are doing this, and the Ad Art Show is scalable. Originally, we did on Link NYC, we were able to extremely quickly scale it up into the Oculus. And Westfield, they have properties that they manage all over the world, airports, different kinds of shopping centers, large screens like that all over. And so there is this digital space that exists in a physical place, but then there's also digital space that exists in conventional advertising platforms, whatever you're looking on something online or you're watching television. So to expand what the possibilities are in that way, I think is very exciting. For me, as someone who loves art, who loves to expand the accessibility of art, I think those are all extremely interesting ways to do it. And I'm very grateful for all the sponsors to help facilitate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
For me, I think, the fact that we are introducing new artists to the art world, I think is wonderful. These artists would not have shown, some of them do already, and they're just having, joining our group, but some really never have. And so I think the idea of introducing new artists and then to encourage artists from advertising to show their art. How many have called me, big creative directors, executive creative directors, saying, Maria, I do have art, but I've never really shown it. Or do you think my art is good enough? Here you have this very big creative executive director and asking me, Isaac, do you think I should be in the show? And yes, I mean, I have to say the quality is very, very good. Now, we don't take everybody, right? We have a selection committee. So the quality of the art is high. We try to be as inclusive as possible. So for me, I think it's very important that we're introducing a new group of artists, and that the art world has a chance to discover it. But on top of the art world, just like Isaac was saying, because we're out there in the public in New York City, you know, the public has a chance to discover it. In fact, during this POV, lunchtime POVs, we're also bringing collectors, we're interviewing them and asking them, how do you collect art? You know, so we want people to learn. And we also have some programs on this POV this month where, you know, we're going to be talking about how to really succeed as an artist in the business world. So to me, these are all part of what we're doing. And hopefully our artists will also sell their art, because really at the end of the day, you know, that's recognition. So I encourage everybody to go on our website and click discover our artists, go to our gallery. And if you like something, you know, think about it. It's great to be, even if it's your first purchase, but it's a good thing to do. So maybe a new way to live.
Great.
Yeah, I think for my part, you know, the whole idea of legacy behind this is being able to open up new avenues for people to appreciate art and for artists to discover themselves. There is somebody out there right now working in some advertising agency or maybe, you know, for some publisher somewhere, and they want to do art. And I think this is an opportunity, and hopefully this is a way for those folks to know there's an avenue to get there, to achieve the kind of things that they know they can. It was great to meet the artists last year when we had our show, our first at the Oculus, and I was able to come out and meet a lot of the artists. I discovered a few of them were folks who I had known back in the previous 20 years back in New York, and we remembered the same creative directors and the same ad agencies and the same clients, struggled through the same processes, and here they were 20 years later now with a little studio on the Lower East Side, struggling to get their artwork seen, and they see this ad art show and they put their work in and they were accepted. So it was nice to be able to see that come full circle. So I would hope it's the kind of thing that in the future people say, yeah, remember when there was only one of these and it was called that art show? And hopefully there's, you know, 30 or 40 or 50, who knows? But it's been an interesting opportunity to be a part of it because it feels very new. It feels very different from what it was before. And as I said, times have changed. This year has changed a lot of stuff about a lot of this. You know, everything that we're looking at for the future, and that art show is very much a part of what that future will be.
That's great. Well, Roger, Isaac, and Maria, I really appreciate the time that you've taken to build this phenomenal experience for the viewing public, for the advertising community, and for the art world, and also for having the moment to you know, get everybody reintroduced to what the Ad Art Show is. So it's been great talking to you, and for everybody viewing this, look out for more of these interviews from my peers, Debbie with Artful Circle, and then Erica and Alexis with To Practice a Practice throughout the month of September. And I'll be back talking to some of the best new and old school creative ambassadors of artistry and creativity. So thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks, Bennett.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bennett, Maria, Roger, and Isaac for today's great conversation. And thank you all for joining us on today's live stream. We encourage you all to tune in tomorrow for our next live Lunchtime POV with Dr. Erica Wong of To Practice Practice and Alexis Hyde of Softcore LA. Make sure to visit MvVOart.com, check out our artsy gallery at artsy.net/MvVO, and follow us on Instagram at MvVOart. For more information on this year's show, where to buy art, and for more about our programming for the month of September. I encourage everyone to go to our website and view our fundraiser on Custom Ink and buy a commemorative branded t-shirt to support City Harvest during Hunger Action Month. And visit the Oculus at Westfield World Trade Center if you are able to see the Ad Art Show 2020 come to life on the screens. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
That wasn't bad. Thank you so much, Emily.